Thank you, Lawrence. Hello, everybody. Put my props down there. So yes, usability at TradeMe. So this is a very different thing for me to be talking about than what I normally talk about. I normally talk about booking systems. So this is a bit of a departure from the norm, and Cornelius is much more of an expert than me. We're at Hagley Park, so it feels appropriate to use some sort of cricket analogy. If he's the Black Caps, I'm more like the Beige Brigade. So I'm going to talk about sort of my experience with usability and the sort of things we do around the business at TradeMe, and how we use it to help us build things for humans. So first thing for me is, what is usability? How do we use it? Why do we use it? For me, and I look after a few different sites at TradeMe. As Lawrence said, I look after Book It, Travelbug, Holiday Houses, and also for my sins, I look after our dating website, Find Someone, which adds a bit of a different slant on things. And in all of those websites, they've all got different challenges. They've all got different users, different sets of customers. In fact, for sites like Holiday Houses, there's two sets of customers for that site alone. You've got the renters and you've got the holiday house owners. So there's a lot of different questions you need to answer all day, every day about these sites. And it can get very easy to get bogged down in, charts and Google Analytics, sort of, real-time reports and product roadmaps and your dev queues and what's going in the pipe and when's it going to be released. There's all sorts of questions all the time. And one of the key questions is, what are we going to build next? How do we know what to build next? What do our users want? And the really fortunate thing is, as Cornelia said, it doesn't need to be hard. None of us have one of these things to really be able to just all of a sudden understand with a bolt of lightning what our customers want. We actually have to ask them. So for us at TradeMe, one of our values at TradeMe is decide and act on merit. And that's the one that I've chosen to talk about today in terms of why usability matters at TradeMe. Because we want to make the right decisions at the right times for the right reasons, in the right context. So deciding and acting on merit is really important, and that's a key determinant for us. The other thing is that at TradeMe we use Agile. Some of you may use Agile or may have web developers who use Agile, or some may not. And whether or not you necessarily agree with it, the thing that we connect with at TradeMe is how it lets us make small improvements more frequently and build, measure, learn, all those sorts of buzzwords, and work on the approach of taking a minimum viable product, or MVP, and building on it. But the problem with a minimal viable product, as I read from, there was a quote from David Bland, who's the CEO at Neo in the States, and he said, the challenge with MVP is that you determine what minimum is, but it's your customer who determines what viable is. And so if you're not asking your customer before you build it about what viable means to them, then how are you going to know what's going to work when you actually deliver it? So what I want to talk about is a few of the typical UX methods that we go through at TradeMe. Such as the sorts of things that Cornelius actually spoke about, user testing, surveys, and A/B testing. But what does it mean in practice for us? So user testing, first of all, we do a bunch of these sorts of setups. Apologies for the blurry photo, but we have a UX team who quite often are engaging with the external clients or external customers who come into the building, sit down with us in front of a computer with a scenario. We'll video them. Sometimes we'll have people in another room watching them live as they're doing it to get an idea of the sorts of things that they're saying. We'll be recording those sessions as well as taking notes as we go along. We don't have many in any one group. Sort of 5 or 6 people is definitely does give us enough insights if we've chosen our group right. But there's a lot of different things you need to think about when you're doing these sessions. So first, can I have a show of hands? Who's done this sort of thing? Who's sort of had people in front of them, gone through scenarios? Yep. So they can be really useful, but they can actually, if you don't do them right, they can be really counterproductive sometimes. So what I wanted to do is talk. So the first thing I've got is an example of one we did for holiday houses. And you'll see a video in a second, and what we wanted to do was we figured we had this problem where people couldn't find our advanced search. They couldn't find it, they weren't using it, so we wanted to know why. So you'll probably see, and I'll I'll give you the tip that you'll see wasn't necessarily obvious to the person in the video. Was that Refine Search is all the way over on the right-hand side up the top in sort of greyed out lettering. So that's what we want this woman to find. While I can't, when we watch this video, you won't hear her voice or see her face, because we have to block this stuff out for privacy reasons. But you should be able to see her mouse moving around the screen. So I want you to think about what you might feel if you're me watching this video as the person who just wants their user to click on Refine Search. So here we go.
You know how when you looked at the search results last time, you put in sort of the dates that you wanted to go, and it was kind of this many adults and this many kids. Let's say that you wanted to do that same thing on this site. How would you go about that?
So now she's taking control, and you'll kind of see it track around the screen. At the moment, she's saying words like and I guess and feature, she's not very certain at all. And you'll see she's so close. Come on, you can do it. Come on. No. Cold. And so she didn't find it all on that page, and now she's come through to this page. She's asking the user tester, asking them some questions along the way, trying to get some hints, and then she does all sorts of other things. So I'll end the video there, but because it's painful for me still to watch this, we'll go through to the next screen. So at the end of these user testing sessions, you get a lot of interesting information. And this is a bad screenshot of a scan of a report like this that I got from our UX team for a set of travel bug tests that we did, where they go through the pages and they highlight all the greens and the reds and the oranges of all the different things, summarising some of the quotes and the comments and the themes that they were seeing through from the users. It can be really, really useful, and you can get some good insights, not just for small changes, but for big stuff. So how do we do this stuff? Well, the first thing is you need to understand the user up front. You need to know who is coming in to talk with you. You need to make sure that you've chosen the right people for the right reason. So if you've got a specific demographic that you want to focus on, make sure that those are the people coming doing this in the session. It sounds really simple, but it can quite often be hard to do. There are external agencies that you can use to source people for you, and I think you can pay anywhere in the region of sort of $100 to $150 per person for a really well-curated group that really matches your demographic. But it doesn't have to be that expensive if you know people. Quite often, we all know people. I'm sure you all work in places where there aren't people who are so heavily invested in the website that you guys run that they can't help you with some informed opinions on how the site runs for the average sort of punter. So don't be afraid to just use people around the office. We like to shut up in our user testing sessions. The key skill of any of our user testers is that they don't say anything wherever possible, and they just let the user lead the session. They let the user guide themselves. They'll ask questions along the way, and I'll talk about that in a second, but try and be quiet as much as possible. And we need to obsess about bias. So, bias as a word is pretty obvious, right? It's our prejudices. It's the things that we think that influence the way we act or the way we interpret information. And there are lots of different biases that can affect user testing. Here's some of them. So if you do a Wikipedia search for bias, you'll get sort of lists of these sorts of things. And there's a couple of key ones. So up there we've got confirmation bias, which is where we tend to look for or interpret information in a way that backs up our existing opinion. So we've got an opinion, we know we're right, we'll see this information, we'll interpret the way that backs up our original opinion. So confirmation bias can be really bad for user testing. Another one is the IKEA effect. So IKEA, obviously a really large furniture brand that in which you can buy kit set furniture that you put together yourself. The IKEA effect is where you have a tendency to value things that you have at least a partial input into the creation of. So as people who look after websites, you can be really, like with my Refine Search example, you can be really tempted to be biased towards thinking that the thing that you created is the right thing. And the IKEA effect usually works, but not sometimes. I think she's probably changed her opinion about that chair that she's done a great job with. And there's a bunch of other biases that come into user testing. Don't be freaked out about that. Just try and think to yourself all the time, am I framing my question, am I framing my test in a way that lets the user lead this rather than letting me lead the user? Otherwise you'll get bad results. So the next little video I want to show you is an example of how someone is engaging with the user in the user test. And I want you to tell me after this if you think they've done an okay job, a great job, or a terrible job in the way that they've engaged with the person.
Okay, so after you log in, the first page that will appear will be a list of suggested friends.
Okay, what happens if instead of using these friends, I want to put in my own friends?
Okay, so I need to make that more clear. You'd actually press done, and this page would pop up. Invite friends is an option.
Okay, what do you reckon? Was that good or bad? What? Bad? Yep. No, there's a lot of people shaking their heads. Yeah, no, not great. Why not? So what sort of things was she doing? Anyone want to? Steering? Yep. So the person asked a question and what did she do? She said, here's the answer. Here's a bit of paper that shows you the answer. So that sort of stuff isn't great. You're right, it's steering her the right way. So here's some sort of things that maybe she could have used instead when she said, okay, well, what if I want to do this thing? She could have said, oh, what do you think? Well, tell me more about that. Or 5 seconds silence. So just let the user fill in the answer or answer for themselves. So it's a really short video, so we're going to watch it again and have a think about those specific questions in that context.
Okay, so after you log in, the first page that will appear will be a list of suggested friends.
Okay, what happens if instead of using these friends, I want to put in my own friends?
Okay, so I need to make that more clear. You'd actually press done, and this page would pop up. Invite friends is an option.
Cool. So you can see how those might have made that go a little bit differently. So that's using an example, by the way, of sort of printed prototypes, which we use a bunch around TradeMe, especially for our mobile products. Quite often the team will walk around the office with sort of printed out screenshots in order that they just sort of randomly barge into you in the kitchen and say, hey, we're doing this thing, can you look through these, what would you do on this, and just do random sort of ambush user testing on people around the office, so it's quite handy. And they can be really useful. First thing is because you don't have to have built it before you test it, and you can do it using designs. You can use wireframes, use one of those free wireframing tools like Balsamic or any of that sort of stuff, and you can get some good results pretty quickly. The other thing that we've discovered in all of this is chocolate works really well as a bribe for user testing candidates. It works so well that you can do this. This is something that they did out in front of TradeMe. They wanted to do some user testing. They didn't have any candidates. They rocked out into so we're down on the waterfront in Wellington, sort of by Te Papa. They went out on the concourse out by Te Papa and they wanted to do some travel testing. So it said, they had this little sign with them standing out there with their user testing kit. Book travel online, $20 New World voucher for 12 minutes of your time. That's a pretty good deal, right? That's a pretty good deal. No one was interested in doing that. They did this sort of thing next, and this is for an Android one, but Android user, a block of winners for 5 minutes of your time. They were inundated with people who wanted to come and do some user testing. So chocolate works really well. And if you're interested in which chocolate works well, it's the dark Ghana. That's the most appealing. So chocolate. Surveys, just like Cornelius, we do surveys. We do a lot of surveys. We probably do too many surveys, and sometimes my inbox is full of them. But they're very useful if used in the right way, obviously. In terms of the sorts of questions we ask, we've got a bunch of different types. So first of all, the behavioural ones. So how would you best describe yourself? When did you last use X site? Why did you go there? So just sort of trying to tease out their behaviours, their reasoning, their motivation. Then, of course, we've got satisfaction questions. What do you like most about, or what do you like least about? So, but you'll notice they're really open. They're not guiding. They're not steering them. It's just sort of asking them for their full and frank feedback. And if you had to break those out into groups, sort of their who, what, and does our site work for them? And if not, in what ways? So that's what we're hoping to gain from those sorts of questions. And surveys can be another area in which bias can really creep in. I'm sure you've all done surveys where, in fact, I had one from a hotel a couple of weeks ago. They sent me an online survey afterwards, and they sort of, how did you rate your stay? And the options they gave me were something like, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but this is the tone of it: fantastic, really good, satisfactory, poor. So it was really heavily weighted towards getting a really positive result. And so those are the sorts of traps you can fall into with surveys. And you guys all know this, but here's a couple of interesting... sorry, I've got one more before we go into surveys. This is interesting, I'll do it anyway. iPhone testing. We wanted to know, we're having a problem with people not being able to find favourites on the Trade Me iPhone app. And we were doing some work around what we could do there. So we did some mock-up testing via an online testing tool here, and you can't read it, so I'll read it for you. You want to look at a search that you've previously saved, i.e. a favourite search. If you don't use favourite searches on Trade Me, then skip this question. Now, we don't get it right at Trade Me all the time. This is a really awful question. Why is this an awful question? I've said search in this question 3 times, and you'll see on the screenshot there's a button that says search. Where do you think people are going to click? Search. So we got meaningless results out of this, and we had to repeat it again. So just be really careful with how you phrase stuff. That was really awful. So yeah, obsess about that bias. So here's a survey in which you could strike, which is quite interesting. So this came from Hendrik Muller in a conference a couple of years ago, and I've kept it because I found it really interesting. So here's an example where, depending on the way in which you ask the question, you can either get different results or fewer results or just not as good engagement. So this question: over the last month, in which of the following locations have you used your smartphone? In the bedroom, while driving, at my desk, on the couch, on the toilet, in the kitchen, none of the above. That's the first way you could ask it. The second way you could ask it down the bottom was side by side with a name and email address field that you required as part of the survey. Which do you reckon got more responses overall? Yell out, I can't hear you. 1, yeah, exactly. Why? Yeah. So it's more anonymous. You don't have to be afraid of telling people that you mostly use your phone on the toilet. It's not surprising, but the results are quite stark. So, the anonymous survey did definitely tease out more responses, particularly on the more sensitive questions. So just think about that sort of stuff when you're doing your surveys as well. Then A/B testing. I'm not going to go. I've got a few of these, and in fact, it's really interesting because I've got a which test one slide as well, Cornelius. Here's one that I found that I quite liked because of how it speaks to context. So here's 2, same version. Hands up who thinks that version A, everything on these pages is exactly the same apart from the button colour that says reserve. So hands up for version A1. Hands up version B. You guys are incredible. What brave soul who said version B, who got it right, is going to tell me why they said version B? Stands out. Colour of the button, yeah. So, yeah. Because you're right. I mean, the button stands out much better on the page. I think mostly because on the previous one there was, there's other blue elements, so the blue element on the button doesn't stick out. Does this mean that orange buttons are the best for conversion? No, it's all about context, right? On that page, in that instance, with that brand, the orange button worked better. But yeah, they saw a good lift. So think about the context of the answers that you're getting as well, and figure out if it's something you should apply across everything that you do or just in that one specific instance. Here's some stuff we did with Find Someone, the dating site that we look after. So we've got this sense of you can be a free member or a paid member. You get different stuff if you pay us, and you can also buy these things called message packs. And on the page in which you can upgrade to a gold membership, I thought that our message pack placement was really confusing and was probably going to be reducing the number of conversions to gold memberships that we have. And so I wanted to do a bit of a test. So here's this, up above this is where the 3 gold memberships are, and then you go down to this message pack thing. So we did an A/B test in which we hid the gold message pack, and another one where we did a completely separate test where we removed it altogether. But on the one where we hid it under a link, using Google Experiments, by the way, which we haven't touched on today, I'm finding really useful. Has anyone used Google Experiments? Martin, you've used everything. A couple other people. I'm finding it really useful because it's simple. It's just a small piece of code you need to put on the page, and everything is automatically in your GA account so that you can track all your conversions and mix it in with everything else you do. So just down the bottom on the behavior tab there in GA, you'll find experiments. So we did this test, and we found that the variation 1, which was the one that hid the message pack, outperformed in average revenue by nearly 2 to 1. It was really successful. Now, this was our first Google experiment we did, and the sharp-eyed among you will have noticed that the experiment sessions for variation 1 was 32,000 versus 3,000 for the original. That's because you can specify, by default, Google Experiments will optimize and learn as it goes, and it will direct traffic to your best performing version so that you don't miss out on revenue during the course of the test, but tries to maintain a level of integrity to the test as well so that you don't spoil the results. But our next one that we're going to do, and I haven't started it yet, we'll actually just split the traffic evenly, and we'll see if we come out with similar results. So Google Experiments can be really cool. So now that's our page there at the moment while we're going to push on and do another test. So check out our message pack as a drop down. So we also do some testing on emails. This was another one we did on Find Someone, where we did an upgrade promotion. One was upgrade to gold for $1, and the other one was upgrade and you could go in the draw to win a $500 Prezi card. And we did different versions for men and for women, and we tested across all of them. So between these two, $1 or a Prezi card, hands up who thought that the dollar gold was more enticing? Quite a few. And who thought the Prezi card was more enticing? Well, I think on balance, you guys probably lost that one. 100 to 1 was the dollar. So immediate, cheap gratification rather than going in the draw was a winner there. And in fact, this is an interesting one because on the day that we pushed this test out, we did a sweepstakes because testing should be fun, right, Cornelius? So we did a sweepstakes. And as I went through the sweepstakes and was writing up on the whiteboard who thinks which one's going to win and how many we're going to get, none of us thought that the Prezi card option was going to win. None of us. And we were all sort of, our predictions are more in line with 100 to 1 than even. And at the point that we were about to launch this thing, why are we even doing this test? None of us think this is going to work. But we pushed ahead anyway, so because you can't always trust your gut. And then on Main Trade Me as well, the Main Trade Me site, we're doing a bunch of testing as well all the time. And one that we've got out at the moment I thought you might find interesting is a change to our homepage. So 1% of Trade Me users are currently seeing this version of our homepage. That has not carousels, they don't scroll automatically, we're calling them stripes. So they're kind of Netflix-style stripes that you can click through and scroll through. These stripes will learn, they will be much smarter than our featured listings that are on the homepage at the moment that will constantly serve you things like tractors and weight loss pills and anything and everything based on whoever's choosing to feature those or buy a homepage feature. So we're trying these stripes. So maybe one of us in the room at the moment might be getting this on Trade Me at the moment. And another 1% is going to get a separate version that we're calling Cat Splat. No, sorry, that's Cat Splat. This is promo. So a massive promo tile with the stripes below that. Now this is a promo tile for our life insurance site, Life Direct. Now I'm not a personal fan of this version because I think it looks like a Life Direct homepage, but that's just me. What do I know? So we'll see how these perform. Maybe I'll tell Lawrence how they get on. So lots of user testing of all sorts across Trade Me. And for me, I've been finding it really useful and really valuable getting stuck into this, and it can help me sort of cut through all the data and the numbers and the problems and worrying about what's going to get on the roadmap or into the dev pipe, and I can sit back and be a smug and happy cat. Thank you very much for your time. Any questions?